Here's the scenario. You want a Rolex Datejust, but you don't want the same Datejust as everyone else. We have a list of 20 that we're gonna go through today, 20 variations, and we're gonna rank them as we go. You're probably gonna disagree with a lot of these rankings, but that's showbiz, baby. And with that in mind, let's pull up the first one. Okay, plain Jane Datejust. Don't love it, can't hate it. It certainly stood the test of time, but I feel like there are other better versions in this list. So let's start in the middle with a C. Ooh, the Roman dial. There are a few variations here. Some are good. This one is a little lacking. The standard Roman dial is a great idea with poor execution. The numerals are all too short and a little too squatty. When you look at it head on, you're thinking, why is everyone's backs against the wall? The dance floor is empty. I know there are other Roman dials in there, so for now, let's give this one a D. Ooh, the Palm Dial. So this came out in 2021 and it was definitely a surprise for a lot of people. It's very divisive, of course, but there's a lot of like laser etching technology that goes into creating those overlapping tones between the leaves. For the two-tone, I think it leans into that kind of South Florida grandpa look in a good way. And I think for the steel version, it kind of takes that green dial trend and adds another layer of complexity to it. Palm Dial, B feels good. Okay, Fluted Dial. So this came out same year, same draft class as the Palm Dial, but you certainly don't hear about this one as much. Ironically, I think the Fluted Dial looks better with a smooth bezel. I think the fluted bezel and a Fluted Dial feels a little too copy-paste. Again, it's a fine idea, but it didn't really work out in the metal. And for that reason, I'm out. I'm kidding, I'm gonna go with an E for this one. Okay, the Buckley. So this is our second Roman dial of the day, and I think this proves kind of what difference proportions make. If you're stuck between a Cartier tank and a Datejust, this is a good option. It's kind of like a best of both worlds kind of thing. There's a small handful of colors of the Buckley dial, and guess what? They all work. My favorite is definitely gonna be the gray Ghost. This one, I'm going easy A. Two-tone Datejust. They're not for everyone, but when they hit, and Rolex does a good one. It's, of course, very 1980s, very like Patrick Bateman. I know he wore a Seiko only because Rolex refused to be involved with the film, probably due to the titles and the murder and all that. My recommendation would be, if you are gonna get a two-tone Datejust, get like a black dial or a contrasting strap. Champagne just feels a little too tone on tone. I know it's the most popular, but I think you need like a third strong element to kind of break up that gold steel tension. Anyway, overall, I'm gonna go with a D for this one, I think. Ooh, Tapestry Dial, a little variety. See, this is on like the 4 and 5 digit era of the Rolex references. It catches light really well when you move your wrist, and the vertical pinstriping looks great on a suit, looks great on a Daniel Roth watch, and it looks great here too. The Tapestry Dial is a great example of adding just enough of a design touch without going overboard. This, in my book, is an A. Ooh, Pyramid Dial. Remember when I talked about going overboard? It's cool, but it's just like a little much. You mainly see these on day dates, although there are a few Datejusts with them. You typically see them in ivory, which again, just like catches the light a little bit too much and is a little distracting. In a black dial, solid gold day date, it's killer. But as an overall kind of thing, I'm gonna have to give it a D. Ooh, Jubilee Dial, no, F, no. Okay, so Rolex created this as like the 40th anniversary of the Datejust. That's why like the Jubilee name is in there, Jubilee anniversary, all that. So this came out in the mid 80s. This was a time when certain drugs were very plentiful, certain drugs that make business ideas maybe feel better than they are, and the Jubilee Dial feels like a byproduct of that. I mean, it's basically Rolex's version of the Louis Vuitton purse. And they also have a lot of diamonds on them. It's getting an F, it's getting an F at best. Okay, next one, Mother of Pearl. Yeah, I'm a fan. In general, I'm a fan. I like when companies use compelling natural materials like carbon cases, stone dials, wood dials, and yeah, Mother of Pearl dials. Mother of Pearl in general has been getting more unisex appeal now that Lange's got some, AP's got some, FP Journe's got some. I know Rolex makes these in 36 and 41 millimeters, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here. If you take away the hour markers, you do like a dark kind of Tahitian Mother of Pearl kind of thing. I think it could be nice, moody, and sophisticated. I know I've been on the anti-diamond campaign all day, but I think the fluted bezel and the Jubilee bracelet are flashy enough, especially once you add in a Mother of Pearl dial. Let's keep it simple, keep it classy. I'm giving this a C overall for unrealized potential. Ooh, Lennon dial, yes. Okay, so if you want a dial variation that whispers instead of shouts, Lennon is fantastic. You'll find these, again, in the 4 and 5 digit era of Rolex references, and they just have this like vintage glow to them of like a bygone era. I mean, summer's coming up, so why not add a little Lennon to the wardrobe, you know? This is an A for sure. Okay, so here's one that should be similar to a Lennon, but it just kind of feels different. It's the Shantung dial. I'm messing that up, I'm sure. It's named after a Chinese silk. It's also called like a brick dial sometimes, and it has this kind of like uneven mosaic kind of pattern in there. I believe these were made for the Asian markets in like 60s, maybe 70s. You'll see them on Oyster Perpetuals a lot, but they also are on Datejust too. The issue that I have with these is that a lot of times they're done in blue, which kind of gives like a denim look to it. A lot of other brands, I won't say who, have tried denim dials. They never really work out. They always look a little bit cheap. Shantung can turn tropical, and I think that's when it's at its best. Overall, good, not great. Let's give it a B. Ooh, Oysterquartz. So most of you already know the story behind the Oysterquartz. Quartz prices came up. They were cheap, accurate movements. They were very hot at the time. That put the Swiss watch industry into a bit of a tailspin. And so a lot of brands like Patek, like AP, like Rolex, scrambled to make their own quartz movements to keep up. Thus, we have the Oysterquartz. You have date versions and Datejust versions of these. The cases are cool, the bracelets are cool, you have two-tone, you have steel. You also have the reference 1530, which is an Oysterquartz case with a mechanical movement, or do the Texano, which is even more rare and more expensive, but that's a whole nother video. Oysterquartz. This is either gonna be a B or a D. I feel like it's too divisive to call it a true C. I'm gonna go B just because the bracelets are so cool. And it's a nice time capsule in Rolex history, so there you go. Ooh, wide boy. I always say this in like a Southern accent. Wide boy. He ain't fat, but he wide. Anyways, the name comes from the wider than average hands and hour markers. And again, this is like a small step that really makes a big difference. Also, most of these have pipe hand dials, open sixes, toasty little loom plots. It all kind of works together to make this nice, perfectly balanced sauce that brings the standard Datejust into something a little punchier. Obviously, I'm a big fan. Wide boys going right to A tier. Okay, so we have Tropical and Confetti, which are different, but I guess for today we're lumping them together. I mean, both are variations on it. It's like a dial that doesn't look like it should, let's say. Tropical, of course, is a result of degradation due to heat and moisture. Confetti dials, I believe, were made by Rolex with small little spets once you get in close. So what they have in common is that they offer this like richness that really draws you in. And because of that, B feels good. For tropical, you know, I'd say you could go anywhere from S to F on this scale, since they're all unique, but let's do B. B is good. Okay, boom, another Roman dial. This is the Wimbledon. This is made to commemorate, obviously, the Rolex sponsorship of Wimbledon. It started off in the Datejust 2, which became the Datejust 41. Now you have it in 36 and 41 with all the typical bezel, bracelet configurations and things like that. It's better than the standard Roman dial. I like these strong Roman numerals with these green outlines. The only thing that kind of gets me about this watch is at 9 o'clock you have this little like breath mint piece of loom. It balances out the date window nicely, but in the dark it's gotta be like a little bit weird, right? For that reason, strong C. Okay, chronograph, cool, Rolex piece of history. Grandfather of Rolex sport watches had a rotating bezel before the Submariner. You've got vintage versions, you have neo-vintage versions. Some people think it's kind of a confused combination between dress and sport. It can work to its favor sometimes, and then you get a great all-around daily driver watch that looks good, but you also can time stuff with. But you have to have a lot of things go right in order for it to feel organic. And it hurts. I'm gonna put this in the D tier. Okay, let's pick it up a little bit. We have the Sunbeam Dial, which is great. I love these. Okay, so these are kind of a lot visually. You'll see them in two-tone, which is a little bit too much at once, but the best versions are going to be all steel, black, which really lets the texture of the rhythm of the Sunbeam really sing. I think these are a great option. You don't see them very often at all. I think Rolex could bring this back. I'm gonna give it an A. Why not? Okay, bamboo bezel, this is killer. So these are like really early Datejust, I think like 1603 or something like that. If you think the smooth bezel is a little bit too boring, if you think the fluted bezel is a little bit too busy, check out the bamboo bezel. It has this nice rhythm of these like 3 little notches at every hour marker, which I think adds to the legibility of the watch as well. It's super cool, it's nice vintage. There's other little vintage touches in here, pipe hand dials and things like that. This is for sure getting an A. Okay, we need an S tier and I think we got it. Let's talk about honeycomb dials. So these, I believe, were just like a mid-50s kind of thing. It reminds me a lot of the old Milgauses, which are some of my absolute all-time favorite vintage Rolexes. And like the Milgauss, you have this beautiful texture on the dial. You have these really sharp applied hour markers, these hands, little pops of red everywhere. This is a great example of what I call visual grip. There's just a lot that keeps you locked in on this dial. This is definitely an S tier. I think we got it. All right, let's look at the whole thing real quick. Okay, so I'm happy with it for an off-the-cuff kind of thing. I would say I think texture works really well in general. There's also a theme of kind of risk-taking. In general, I'd kind of downgraded watches based on that, but I think there are some shining examples coming off of those more adventurous design decisions. The Rolex Datejust is a great canvas. I think little touches go a long way, and I think you can easily go overboard. It's a delicate balance. All right, let's hear it. What did I mess up? What would you do differently? This was super fun. I would love to see what other rankings people have for these. I'm sure there's other ones that I forgot. The boiler gauge, I forgot. That's a B, I think. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you.